The city was a smear of bleeding neon through the grime-streaked window of the bus, a wound that refused to close. Each streetlight that flashed across my face felt like an accusation, another spotlight in the vast, dark stage of my escape. My heart was a frantic bird beating against the cage of my ribs, its rhythm a desperate staccato against the dull drone of the engine. In my hand, my phone was a block of ice, a conduit for the poison that had chased me out of my own life. It vibrated again, relentless, sickening tremor that shot up my arm. I didn't need to look at the screen. I knew the words were a variation on a theme, a twisted sonata of obsession Julian had been composing for years. "Where are you, Amara? You can't just leave."
I'm wedded.
The lie of it was the most chilling part, that fake concern draped over a core of pure, unyielding control. My thumb hovered over the power button, a tiny rebellion I couldn't yet afford. He needed to think I was still reachable, still a ghost he could grasp at. To disappear entirely would be to declare a war I wasn't yet equipped to fight. My reflection in the dark glass was a stranger's, a woman with eyes too wide and a pallor that drank the color from her deep brown skin. I was Amara, 26 years old, and I was running from a man who believed my heartbeat belonged to him. The memory of his voice, low and laced with a terrifying calm as he told me what would happen if I ever left, was a physical thing, coiling in my gut. "I will find you. There is no place on this earth you can go where I won't find you." The bus hissed to a stop, jolting me from the paralysis of memory. This was it. The address I'd picked at random from a list of boutique hotels, chosen for its sterile name and promise of anonymity. The Black Swan. It sounded like a place where one could simply vanish. I clutched the worn strap of my single bag, a pathetic summary of a life hastily packed, and stepped out into the biting night air. The hotel loomed before me, a monolith of dark glass and steel, its entrance a small, discreet slash of warm, golden light. It was imposing, almost intimidating, but it was also solid. It was a fortress. And tonight, that was all I needed. The transition from the chaotic chill of the street to the lobby of the Black Swan was so abrupt it was dizzying, like stepping into another dimension. The air inside was still and warm, scented with something clean and woody, like cedar and old books. There was no noise, only a profound, enveloping silence that seemed to absorb the frantic pulse in my ears. The design was minimalist yet opulent, a landscape of dark wood, brushed metal, and deep, charcoal-colored furniture. It was a space designed for quiet contemplation, for secrets to be kept. And behind a sprawling, polished black marble desk stood a man who seemed to be the living embodiment of the hotel itself. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit and a crisp white collared shirt that seemed molded to the lean lines of his body. His black hair was styled with a precise, almost severe part, and his face was a collection of sharp, handsome angles. He wasn't looking at me, but I felt his awareness, a kind of gravitational pull that centered the entire room on him. As I approached the desk, his gaze lifted, and his eyes, dark and intelligent, met mine. They missed nothing. I knew in an instant that he saw the tremor in my hands, the wildness in my eyes. He saw the story of my flight written all over me. I expected a question, a hint of suspicion, but his expression remained unreadable, a mask of calm professionalism. A young woman at the far end of the desk hurried over, but he gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of his head, and she retreated with a flicker of fear in her eyes. He would handle this himself. Checking in, his voice was deep and smooth, a low baritone that held no judgment, only a quiet authority. I could only nod, my own voice a prisoner in my throat. He pushed the terminal towards me, without a word. As I shakily inserted my card, I watched him. This man was no mere concierge. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of immense control, a stark and dizzying contrast to the chaotic, explosive energy of Julian. His name, according to the small, discreet plaque on the desk, was Dae-hyun Park. The key card he placed in my hand felt heavy, like a promise. As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. "Welcome to the Black Swan," he said, The words simple, yet they landed with a strange weight. We value the privacy of our guests above all else. It felt less like a platitude and more like a statement of fact, a carefully worded vow from a man who understood the need for secrets. The suite was vast, silent, and immaculate, an extension of the lobby's soul. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of the city's glittering sprawl, a universe away from the dingy apartment I had just fled. The bed was a cloud of white linens, and the air was still and clean. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could breathe. I dropped my bag and slid the deadbolt and chain on the heavy door. The solid, metallic clicks were the most beautiful sounds I had ever heard. I was safe. The thought was so overwhelming that my knees buckled, and I slid down the door to the floor, finally letting the tremors take over. But safety is a fragile illusion. Just as relief began to wash over me, my phone, which I'd placed on a table, began to buzz furiously. It was the tantrum of a thwarted king. I crawled towards it, my heart resuming its frantic rhythm. The screen was a nightmare of Julian's making. Amara, pick up the phone.
Now.
A dozen missed calls. The messages started with feigned love, then turned to guilt, and finally, the unveiled threat I knew so well. You really think you can hide from me? You belong to me, Amara. A little game of hide and seek won't change that. Each word was a digital chain, pulling me back into the darkness. I trembled as I finally did it. I blocked his number. The silence that followed was deafening, more terrifying than the buzzing. And then, a sharp, sudden knock echoed from the other side of the door. My blood turned to ice. It was impossible. He couldn't have found me this fast. My entire world shrank to the space between my ear and the polished wood of the door. It had to be him. I squeezed my eyes shut, picturing his charming smile that never reached his cold eyes. The knock wasn't frantic. It was measured, patient. It was the knock of someone who knew I was in here. A voice cut through the silence, and my heart stopped. It wasn't Julian. Miss Hale? The voice was the deep, calm baritone from the front desk. Dae-hyun Park. Relief crashed over me so violently it almost brought me to my knees, but it was immediately followed by a new current of anxiety. Why was he here? I fumbled with the chain and opened the door a crack. He stood in the hallway, his posture perfect in that same black suit, his expression unreadable. My apologies for the disturbance, he said, his voice even. The front desk received a rather insistent series of calls regarding the occupant of this room. For security reasons, I felt it was best to check on you personally. He finally met my gaze, and for a moment, the professional mask seemed to slip. I saw something else in his dark eyes, a flicker of grim understanding. He knew. He had seen women like me before. He found me, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. How did he find this hotel? Dae-hyun's gaze was steady. He hasn't, he stated, the certainty in his tone a strange comfort. He is simply casting a wide net, calling every hotel of a certain caliber. It is a predictable pattern for a man like that, a man like that. The simple phrase validated everything. What do I do? The question was a plea. He was silent for a long moment, his eyes scanning my face, as if weighing my soul. You will do nothing, he said, the words a soft command. My staff will handle all incoming calls. Your name will be removed from the guest registry. As of this moment, this room is unlisted. No one will contact you again unless you wish it. The offer hung in the air, a shield forged from his quiet authority. A part of me screamed that it was a trap, but as I looked at Dae-hyun Park, at the unnerving clarity in his eyes, I saw no deception. He wasn't offering pity. He was offering a tactical solution. Why? The word escaped me. Why are you doing this? A flicker of something I couldn't decipher passed through his expression. Let's just say, he replied, his voice a low murmur, that I have a personal dislike for bullies. He held out a sleek, black burner phone. This is for you. It is secure and untraceable. The only number programmed into it is for my personal assistant. If you need anything, you use this. Your old phone is a liability. It's a tracking device you're paying for. I stared at the phone, then back at him. He wasn't just giving me a room. He was giving me armor. I took the phone, my fingers brushing against his. His skin was cool, his hand steady. "Thank you," I said, my voice firm, imbued with a sliver of the strength he seemed to be lending me. He gave a slight, formal bow. "Get some rest, Miss Hale. You are safe here." He turned and walked away, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet. I closed the door, bolting it once more. Following his advice, I powered down my old phone, and as the screen went black, it felt like I was finally, truly, cutting the cord. The first few days were a blur of sleep and silence. On the fourth day, I found the hotel library, a temple of dark wood and leather armchairs. I chose a book of poetry and settled into a secluded corner. I don't know how long he was there before I noticed him. Dae-hyun was standing near a far bookshelf, out of his suit for the first time, dressed in dark trousers and a soft, charcoal gray cashmere sweater that made him seem younger, more approachable. He held a glass of amber liquid, which he swirled gently. He walked over and took the armchair opposite mine. "Neruda," he said, nodding towards the book in my lap. "A man who understood longing." I closed the book. "He understood that love could be a battlefield," I countered. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "All of the most important things are," he looked at me, his gaze softening from professional assessment to something more personal. "You look better. There is color in your cheeks." The simple observation felt more intimate than any compliment. "It's the silence," I admitted. I'd forgotten what it sounded like. He nodded, taking a slow sip of his drink. "What did you love to do, Amara, before you had to fight so hard to simply exist?" The question, the use of my first name, caught me off guard. I painted," I said, the memory feeling like it belonged to another woman. "Landscapes. Big, messy, colorful things." He smiled, a real smile this time. It changed his entire face. "I would like to see them someday in his presence." I felt the foundations of my own fortress beginning to take shape, and for the first time, I wondered if I might want to build a door in one of the walls. The new phone chimed a day later. "There is a laptop on the desk in the study. Second door on the right. It is secure. Use it as you see fit." I fell into a new rhythm, spending my days in that quiet, masculine study, methodically erasing myself. I closed bank accounts, deleted social media, dismantling the digital ghost of Amara Hale. One evening, he appeared in the doorway as I was hunched over the keyboard. He didn't knock, just stood there holding a tray with 2 bowls of steaming soup and a pot of tea. "You'll work better if you eat," he said, his voice a low murmur. He set the tray down, and we ate in comfortable silence, the only sounds the clink of spoons and the rain beginning to tap against the window. "You said you dislike bullies," I said, emboldened by the intimacy of the moment. That seemed personal. He was silent for a long time, his gaze distant. "I was once in a position where I could not protect someone who needed it," he said, his voice tight with a carefully controlled pain. "I watched a predator, a man much like yours, destroy someone I cared for because he believed he owned her. I will not make that mistake again." He looked at me then, and the pain in his eyes was raw, unguarded. It was the first real crack in his enigmatic facade, a glimpse of the fire and loss that forged his code. In that moment, I realized my feelings for him were becoming something far more complex and far more dangerous than simple gratitude. I reached across the small table, my hand covering his. He turned his hand over, his fingers lacing through mine. "You're not that man anymore," I whispered. A news alert popped up on the laptop a few days later, shattering the peace. A local tech entrepreneur, Julian Thorne, had announced a massive charitable donation to a citywide domestic violence initiative. There he was, smiling his perfect, predatory smile, shaking hands with the mayor. He was laundering his reputation, painting himself as a savior while hunting me. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my new armor. He was an institution. How could I ever fight that? My hands trembled as I picked up the black phone. "Dae-hyun," I said, my voice shaking. "I need you," he simply said. "My office. Top floor. Now." When I walked in, he was standing by his own floor-to-ceiling window, the laptop open on his desk displaying the same news story. He turned, his eyes dark with a controlled fury that seemed to emanate from him in waves. This was the cold, calculating rage of a man whose sanctuary had been breached. But when his eyes landed on me, the rage softened into fierce concern. "Amara," he said, his voice low. He crossed the room in a few long strides and took my face in his hands, his thumbs gently brushing my cheeks. "Breathe." I leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his steadiness. "He's making himself untouchable," I said. "He's building a public fortress." Dae-hyun's gaze was unwavering, his anger now focused, sharpened to a razor's edge. "Then we won't attack the fortress," he replied, a chillingly calm smile gracing his lips. "We will let him invite the enemy within its walls." His office was the heart of his empire. We stood there for hours, not as protector and victim, but as two generals plotting a war. I detailed every aspect of Julian's psychology, his vanity, his need for adoration, his pathological obsession with control. I laid out the enemy's mind for him, and he absorbed every detail. In return, he revealed the tools at his disposal. He spoke of finance, data, and influence as weapons. The quiet calls he made in rapid-fire Korean were not to business partners, but to lieutenants, his voice a low, lethal hum of commands. I was seeing the true extent of his power, the hidden machinery of an organization that operated beneath the placid surface of the Black Swan. He was a force, a mafia boss who pulled strings I never knew existed. The exhaustion finally hit me, and he saw it. He ended a call and led me to a soft leather couch. He sat beside me, the energy in the room shifting from strategic to deeply personal. "You are his greatest weakness, Samara," he said, his voice soft. "He has never faced an opponent who understands him so completely." I looked down at my hands. "He never saw me as an opponent. I was just a possession." "He was wrong," he whispered. He reached out, gently tracing the line of my jaw with his thumb, a gesture of such exquisite tenderness it made my breath catch. He saw me. Not the victim, not the survivor, but me. "Amara." He leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, but I stood my ground, lifting my face to his. The kiss was not a surrender. It was a treaty, a quiet, deliberate claiming of a new world, a world where the protection of a dangerous man could feel like coming home. The dawn broke over the city. I woke up in my own suite, the scent of him still lingering on my skin. For the first time in years, the morning did not bring dread. I found him later in the hotel's private rooftop garden. He was tending to a collection of ancient bonsai trees, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he trimmed a delicate branch with small, precise snips. The meticulous care, the quiet patience, it was a perfect reflection of the man himself. He stopped when he saw me, a soft smile touching his lips. "Good morning, Amara," he said, the sound of my name a declaration of our new intimacy. I walked toward him, my steps sure and confident. I was no longer the frightened woman who had stumbled into his lobby. "Good morning, Dae-hyun," I replied. We talked of the final steps of our plan. It was no longer his plan to protect me. It was our plan to dismantle a predator. I provided the final piece of the puzzle. "He's planning his foundation's launch gala," I said. "It's his coronation. All his powerful friends, the media, politicians. He'll feel completely untouchable. That's when he's most vulnerable." Dae-hyun's gaze sharpened. "An audience," he murmured. "He wants an audience for his own greatness," I nodded. "And we'll give him one. We won't expose him with brute force. We'll let him expose himself." The final strategy was elegant, using Julian's own vanity as the weapon of his undoing. We would leak carefully selected pieces of information, proof of his financial crimes, his stalking, his threats, not to the press, but to his rivals, to the very people he sought to impress, just moments before he took the stage. We would orchestrate a collapse from within. As we finalized the last detail, a sense of profound peace settled over me. My journey was not over, but I was no longer running. I was standing my ground, preparing for a battle on my own terms. Dae-hyun put down his shears and came to stand beside me, his hand finding mine, our fingers lacing together. We stood in silence, looking out over the sprawling city, a world that had once seemed so threatening. Now, it didn't look like a place to hide. It looked like a kingdom of possibilities, a future waiting to be built. My heart, once a frantic bird in a cage, was finally, peacefully, still.